Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Go Local Live. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for Tuesday afternoon news, literature, and politics. We got some national news from UVA, but now we're going to get very local here with Rachel Flum with the Economic Progress Institute.
Hello, Kate.
Thanks for coming back in.
Thanks for having me.
A regular. This is probably, I was got to say, 3, 4, maybe 5 times now.
Oh, we have.
Catching you here downtown before tomorrow, being up at the Rhode Island State House for the Women's Economic Justice Platform with a number of stakeholders regarding a number of pieces of legislation that you're going to be advocating for. I'm assuming you're expecting a big turnout.
Yes, we certainly hope so. Although today's reproductive rights hearing at the State House, hopefully everybody remembers to come back tomorrow for the other bills that we're going to talk about.
Okay, things that are going to be talked about: minimum wage increase to $15, closing the wage gap, protecting against sexual harassment, access to affordable health care, and improving the Paid Family Leave Act. Let's start with that last one because that was qualified by many as a win last session, that was approved. But now you're looking to what you say is improve upon it. What needs to be tweaked in this, in your opinion?
Sure. So this is actually a little bit different than what we talked about last year. That was around paid sick days. So when you need to take an hour or so to go see the doctor, or when you catch the flu, which lots of people have done recently, and you need to take a day off or two to take care of yourself. This is actually about paid family leave. So if you need to take a week off because your elderly mother broke her hip and you need to help support her at home, or after the birth of a new child, or bringing a new child into the home. So this, right now, the paid family leave is called the Temporary Caregiver Insurance, TCI, and Rhode Island has 4 weeks of paid leave, but it's only 60% of wage replacement. So that means that when you're out on leave, you only get about 60% of your wages. And so we know, especially for low-income Rhode Islanders, often they're paying in because this is an employee-funded fund. So all of us are paying about 1% into the fund, but lower income folks aren't able to access the leave. And so this legislation this year would both increase the number of weeks up to 8 weeks, and then also increase the amount of wage replacement.
Okay, and let's talk about the increase in the minimum wage. Now, this is sponsored by Marcia Ranglin-Vassell and Senator Quezada.
Yes, so our minimum wage in Rhode Island just went up to $10.50, but we at the Economic Progress Institute actually do a report every other year, that looks at what it really costs to live here. And Rhode Island is a high cost state, and so a single person needs to be earning at least $13 an hour just to meet his or her basic needs. And we know that about a quarter of minimum wage workers are actually parents, so they have much increased costs for that. So there's a coalition of folks that was working last year and working this year to try to get the minimum wage up to $15 an hour over a number of years. Massachusetts just has that progression they passed last year, so by 2024 they'll be at 15. And so we think it makes sense, since we're so close to the border of Mass, to do a similar increase so that by July of 2024 we would be at 15. And also it would eliminate the tipped wage, which is an important part of that conversation as well, because we know tipped wage earners, there's that whole gender equality piece to that as well. Tipped workers are supposed to be taking home whatever the minimum wage is, but often the dynamics of that that's not the result of what they're actually taking home.
Let's talk a little bit, I know we've discussed this before as well, because you go up and testify, other folks go up and testify. You also hear from the flip side, sometimes a lot of small business owners, small business organizations that say, we can simply absorb being told that we need to be able to pay this. What's your response to that when you hear those folks that come up and you've heard their testimony?
Right. Well, I mean, we know that because Massachusetts is going up, and what we often hear from folks is that they're not able to plan for minimum wage increases. So this bill actually allows them to plan. It's a progression over time so that they know where they're going. We also know that most minimum wage workers are actually in larger employers, and so they are better able to absorb that cost. And so we think that this is, the predictability especially is fair and makes it something that small businesses can figure out over time.
And let's talk about closing the wage gap.
Yes, so this is Women's Month, and unfortunately we know that women are still only being paid about 80% of men's wages, and there are a number of pieces of why that's true. It's not just that I decide to hire someone and pay the woman less than the man, but it's other things like when you first get your first job, your employer may ask, well, what did you make at your last job, and then decide what to pay you based on that. And the result is women often are starting off with lower wage jobs, and so the cumulative effect is that they end up with lower wages over time. So this would really get at that, in that you aren't able to ask what someone made at their last job. You cannot forbid your employees from talking about what people are making. So, and of course, you're not able to just pay men and women for comparable work unequally. So it gets at several pieces of that, and this is especially important for women of color. We just produced a infographic with the Women's Fund that shows for Latina women and Black women that the wage gap is really extreme, and so we hope that both minimum wage increase and looking at these fair wage legislation can really help improve that situation.
And one of the proposals too is addressing sexual harassment. There's a number of proposals. There's actually, looks like 10.
Yeah, so that's really the Sexual Harassment Commission from last year introduced this slate of proposals. So that is really just the slate of all of them together, just to try to get at addressing not being able to discriminate and making sure that there's fair processes and all of those things. So we think that's fair.
Were there any gains made last year, or let's talk where we are in 19, because we're looking here. It seems like a plethora that still needs to be addressed.
Right. Well, we know. One of the reasons we decided to do this event tomorrow is that last year was not a great year for women at the State House, and at the end of the day, there weren't a whole host of things that anyone can point to that advanced women. And so we thought it was important to bring all of these together to say all the women in the state need at least some of these, right? So there's childcare you may need, you may have caregiving that you need to deal with, you may be underpaid or dealing with sexual harassment. So we're hopeful that some of these will move forward this year, and we thought it was a good thing to put them all together and to have a platform to say, women's justice, while reproductive rights is a huge part of that, it's not just about that. It's about all these other pieces as well.
So you want to make sure you encourage folks who are interested in any facet of these pieces of legislation to turn out in support tomorrow. Did we hit them all here?
Well, so the couple we didn't hit, there's child care assistance, so ensuring that our child care providers are adequately paid, because we know women and men too need child care in order to go to work. And we also know that the providers are often underpaid. And then the last one is for our lowest income folks. The program is called Rhode Island Works. There are only about 4,000 families who are supported by Rhode Island Works, but and that's our welfare program. And so there's some proposals to get rid of a short time limit. We have one of the shortest time limits in the whole country, and we really want people to be able to get the skills they need to have family supporting wages at the end of the time that they're on their welfare program. So there are two pieces of legislation that would eliminate that short time limit so that people are able to get the skills that they need and support their families.
So again, a number of pieces of legislation. We'll be sure to put up the links to them as well when folks come back and watch after the fact. Clearly gearing up for a big day tomorrow at the State House. But do you want to give us a little insight as to maybe what to expect from the Economic Progress Institute in the next few weeks and months?
Sure. So we have a legislative agenda that looks at many of these things. We're also pushing for the earned income tax credit, which I've talked to you about before, because that's another way of raising wages for lower income families, but is not business supported. It's really state supported. So we're going to continue to work on that. We have some affordable health insurance pieces, some protections that we're trying to support and work on. We're also having a big conference in May, the beginning of May, that talks about supporting immigrants in the state. Especially under this Trump administration, there has been a chilling effect for immigrants feeling comfortable coming out and accessing health care and the benefits to which they are entitled. And so we're having someone from the National Immigration Law Center come and talk about what's happening on the national level, and then what state agencies are doing locally to support our Rhode Islanders.
Well, as always, plenty coming out of the Economic Progress Institute. I'm so glad you were able to come in here today, tell us a little bit about what's in store at the Rhode Island State House tomorrow with the focus on the Women's Economic Justice Platform. Again, we'll have links to all of those bills as well if you're interested in going or learning more. So Rachel Flum,
Great.
thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
today.
Kate.
I appreciate it. That just about wraps up another day here in downtown Providence for Go Local Live. Of course, tune in tomorrow at 3 o'clock for Laura Afonso for the best with food and drink. And we'll be back here soon. In the meantime, catch Go Local online. Catch us on Facebook on Go